All right, I'm gonna get to everybody before this ends up by all the various aggregators and headbait porn provocateurs. The Texans are not leaving Houston, no matter what Cal McNair says. Here's Cal McNair earlier today.
Would we move out? Yeah, we would move out.
What? No, that's a dirty trick. It's a dirty trick. The Texans are not leaving the greater Houston area. They are exploring all their opportunities and options when it comes to renovating NRG Stadium or possibly at least moving their headquarters away from NRG Stadium so they can have everybody on site in one spot. I'll speak a little bit about the advantages that has for players and a lot of the support staff, but they're very much in negotiations about exactly what they're going to do before the lease expires in 2032, where they share that facility with the rodeo and various other events through the year. It's gotten to be a little bit of a headache in a lot of ways. So Cal and Hannah McNair spoke about it today at the press conference at the Texans charity golf tournament. And Aaron Wilson had video of all of their questions about that. So I'm just going to use Aaron Wilson's video as we go through the Q&A in this regard. There are some things I'll tell you as a former player that are really enticing about potentially having the headquarters in its own facility somewhere. And it's above and beyond like just distractions or anything else like that. Just logistically, it makes a lot more sense when it comes to practice, recovery, training, all of that. Here are Cal and Hannah.
We're working with some really good partners with the rodeo and also the county, and it's a complicated kind of a mixture, but with the practice facility, we're working on that almost every day, and the lease, overall lease, we're working on that, and where we wind up with practice facility, I'm not really quite sure yet. We have a lot of great options, and we'll sort of sort through that, sooner rather than later.
Okay, so there's only 4 teams in the NFL that have their practice facility right in the stadium in which they practice. There's a few that have it really, really close, so I don't know exactly what the difference is there. The difference with the Texans, in a lot of ways, aside from their front office staff who are kind of spread out into different locations, for the football people themselves, just going across the field to the practice, like having to either walk out to the practice field and make it a 5-minute walk and then come back and all of that. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. I mean, everybody's in shape. It's not like you're getting worn out from that. But I think just from the training staff's perspective, there are a lot of facilities where the weight room is right there next to the practice fields. For the athletic trainers are right next to the practice fields. So when guys are getting their treatment, and if the trainers want to work with them a little bit on some running drills or what have you, they just walk right out. The Texans, a large portion of the year, there's something going on in the stadium. So even though the offices are right there, you can't just waltz right out onto the practice field and do something. There's times where it's concrete. There's a circus, or there's a motocross event. There's a concert being set up, and it's cool and entertaining and fun and all, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. Then the other thing too with the weight room, when you talk about training the weights and then just going out and doing some movement drills or what have you, the strength and conditioning coaches are kind of, they don't have it's not as easy. And like, these are all rich folks' problems. The facilities are beautiful. They're awesome. But you're competing against other teams that also have rich folks' problems, and everything is set up just more efficiently. And when you're trying to get things done as efficiently as possible, it's kind of a pain in the butt. That's just on the actual practice and rehab and training side of things. There's other things about being perhaps in a different headquarters further out from the city that makes some sense. We'll see if they touch on that. But just from a player's perspective, it makes sense. Because the Texans have had one big challenge when it comes to having team cohesion right since 2002 when I first got there.
Spot, and we'll keep working out a complex problem.
How far are you willing to go distance-wise from where you are now to find something that works for you?
Well, what's great is we're okay where we are.
Okay.
And so that's our starting point. And then would we move out? Yeah, we would move out and do a brand new one somewhere. But it'd be greater Houston area. Greater Houston area, I'd say.
All right, so greater Houston area. There's 9 counties in the greater Houston area. So when it comes to whatever tax breaks or deals they could get, I know the first knee-jerk reaction I have as a red-blooded capitalist or anything else is, all right, well, how much am I going to have to pay for this multi-billion-dollar organization to get a tax break? If there's only one county to choose from, it becomes a lot simpler. There's 9 different counties, some of them growing very quickly, some of them with massive amounts of real estate that want to attract retail and what have you. That's when it gets interesting. You look at what the Cowboys did. They were able to get a really good deal in the county in which they currently are, and they moved. So amongst those 9 counties, including Harris County, if we start talking about the stadium itself, what are the chances that the Texans just get a good deal somewhere else and they have all those advantages just from the way the actual organization, like they can be together geographically?
That to potentially look and what do you all hope it does for, what you all are trying to grow with the Texans?
So the question is, I guess, what are you hoping to accomplish?
The practice
Yeah,
facility?
practice facility headquarters.
So yeah, very few teams are actually in the facility, the stadium, like we are, and so it's more the norm to move out. And when you do that, there's been some teams that have done it recently where they have development around there, and so those are all things we're looking at. The first thing is to make sure that players are taken care of in a first-class manner so they can go and win games for our fans.
There's also very few stadiums that are used the way that we use our stadium and share it with the county and the rodeo. So there's not really much time to do everything we need to do in that building. And we actually have some people working off-site, so not everyone is able to be in that building anymore.
Yeah, so this is where it gets, from the player's perspective, there's 2 things. One is, let's say the stadium stays at NRG where it currently is at the Houston County, whatever, but you have a headquarters elsewhere. The one thing about Houston is from the get-go in 2002, when we all moved in, we had guys spread out all over the place. In Pearland, Missouri City, in Sugar Land, the Bel Air, West University. Now guys are making enough money that some of them live in the villages up there in the Memorial area. Wasn't quite like that before JJ and all that crew started moving out there. But guys are spread out, and it genuinely makes it tough to really get a bunch of guys all together at any given time. And again, I know, rich folks' problem, but there are other places in Buffalo. Buffalo's always had this tradition of guys, like, it's a pretty tight-knit team, and I think part of it is that up around Orchard Park, New York, it's really easy to get around. And I've always, from the beginning, thought, man, it'd be nice if everybody was more in an area where the guys that are making the league minimum or the practice squad guys can get a nice place or rent a nice place close to where the guys that want to live in big, huge houses are. You're always going to have some guys that want to live in close to all the action and everything. But it does, especially for guys with families, I think it makes it a little bit easier to be that much more tight-knit as a team. And that part of it, I've always wondered about that. If you could do a study of the various different places, Green Bay, super easy. Wherever you buy a house, it's going to be easy for guys to get and see each other, and it's not going to be a 50-minute to a 1.5 hour ordeal fighting through traffic just to go to a cookout. That part I like. The other part, and I don't think this is a big deal, but the first, I in both my stays in the NFL in Jacksonville and Houston had my locker in the stadium where you play on game day. And I always felt like there was something about going out to play on Sunday where it felt a little too much like your routine of just walking in on any normal day into the normal stadium that you always walk into and everything's the same. This is a tiny little bitch. It doesn't matter at all in the grand scheme of things. But I do think there is something to now we're going into the stadium. This is game day. This is when it's really real, to where it just doesn't feel like kind of part of the other routine. You can make the other argument that, hey, the more comfortable you are in your environment, the bigger advantage you have. Neither here nor there. Just me personally.
In what ways can it help the organization to have their own facility?
I couldn't quite hear the question. Let's
Practice
Yeah,
facility.
what ways, separate from what you guys are doing now, what ways can it actually help the organization?
Okay, so how could it help having a separate practice facility? And so most of the questions and everything else are centered around here so far on actually just moving the practice facility away from NRG Stadium, not the stadium itself.
Well, there's pluses and minuses. So some of the pluses is you start with a new clean slate and a new drawing board. The one we're in, was drawn up in 2002, actually before that. And so we've sort of outgrown that both on the business side and on the football side. And so being able to get the proper sizing, the proper workflow, all those things in there will really help us.
Yeah, and I don't know if is anybody going to really be upset about the Texans if they move their practice facility? I think as Little Miss Knott said, coming out to Liberty County, I'll tell you a story in a second about all of that. The thing about Houston is there's nothing easy to get to. It's true. And then when we start talking about the people who are in a support role or work in the front office, a lot of those people are people that don't make a boatload of money. And it's kind of nice to be living out in an area there. It's a little bit more affordable, easier to get to work. People that have to take public transportation, maybe don't take as many buses and whatnot. So there's a lot of advantages to it.
I mean, that's yet to be measured, really.
You mentioned that the only thing is that when you guys left the playoff game, you guys felt that you were close. What have you guys seen over the offseason that makes you guys feel like you're closer to where you guys
last season? What has made you over the offseason feel like perhaps you're closer to making a decision?
Our strategy.
Oh, all right. And then it cut off. It went to D'Amico talking about Tank Dell, who D'Amico said basically the same thing he's been saying about Tank Dell. He's in high spirits. Yep, and we're not worried about putting a date on it. I'm glad that he's in high spirits, and I'm not anticipating, or I'm trying to count on Tank Dell being back. That's neither here nor there. We'll talk about it later. Okay, so I went when I was a free agent one year. It's actually when I was trying to figure out whether I was still going to play football or not. It would have been my 11th season in the NFL. I went to visit the Falcons, and I was blown away because Atlanta's a lot like Houston. It's super massive geographically, and the traffic is ridiculously bad. But their facility is in Flowery Branch, Georgia, which is, I don't know how many miles, but that day from the airport, it seemed like about an hour and a half drive north of Atlanta. But you get out there, and it's, at the time, at least back then, it was still like suburban, but still very rural, or at least still had a bit of a rural feel to it. You got the sense if you went much further north, it was still very rural. I'm sure that's changed since then. But it felt like you're on a Division III college campus. They had the weight room, the offices, the locker room, everything overlooking the practice fields. They had their practice bubble. They had a dormitory that practice squad players or guys who are new to the team and hadn't found a spot yet, and during training camp they used these that were set up like college dorms. It was cool as hell. And I thought, man, this is a way where you feel like you guys are just secluded and you've got your own environment out here. Guys who have families can get a house with a yard without, compared to like you could try to buy a house. Listen. You try to buy a house in Westview or Bel Air, live close to the facility, but it's got a nice big yard. It's a lot. It's a lot. So there was an appeal to me as a married guy with a child at the time, and there was a lake nearby. The guys would go fishing at all the time. The hunters could go hunt, and I think maybe the younger guys probably would have preferred to be closer to the city. But those guys don't need to be closer to the city. They need to be as far away from distraction as possible. Okay. You know, make them pay for that $75 Uber ride into Houston if they got to get themselves into some action. Let's see. So we don't know what the plan is right now, other than that. If you've been waiting for a payoff on all of this, we don't know. I think there's a better chance than not that the headquarters are elsewhere. And look, it's not like in the normal day-to-day of anything that affects anybody, other than sometimes being able to drive down Kirby and see players walking over that bridge or whatever it might be. That's neither here nor there. I think if they moved the stadium itself, it gets really interesting. I'll show you like when I was talking about Flowery Branch, when I made this thumbnail, I was very much thinking of that Flowery Branch experience, where if you moved down to way out. I don't want to be west of Katy. There's places south of Houston where you can still get pretty rural pretty quickly and still get into the stadium quick, especially on a Sunday. You can get into the stadium super fast. And guys could, the kids could have horses. They could have 3 dogs that could go frolic out in their meadow. You could buy a place in one of those places where they're like on 5-acre plots and everything. And I'm sorry for everybody that we're displacing down there. Not I-10, yeah, good call, not on I-10. Just because Cal says something doesn't mean. It's Cal and Hannah, everybody. Have some respect for the power couple. Damn it. Hannah's been just such a revelation for lots of things. I'm going to cut it short and maybe do something actually football related at some point later. But thanks, everybody. Like, subscribe, all the rest of it. I'm sorry I can't get out to all the comments here.